In this segment, we're going to consider Locke's second treatise on civil government against the backdrop of 17th century English politics and in light of its influence on the founding of the United States. Locke wrote the Second Treatise on Civil Government in 1690, amidst an era of high conflict in English history. Locke's work was a rebuttal to Robert Filmer's Patriarcha, which advocated for the divine right of kings. But Locke's treatise transcended this specific debate, posing a broader, more profound question. Who should govern England? Was it the monarch or the Parliament? Locke's revolutionary answer was neither. He argued for the sovereignty of the people, represented through Parliament. Why is this relevant to us? Understanding Locke is pivotal, not only for grasping the historical arguments of his time, but also for appreciating the ideological foundations of the United States. Locke's theories didn't just influence political discourse, they provided a lens for interpreting various aspects of governance and society. Let's explore Locke's views on dominion and paternal jurisdiction, particularly his refutation of Filmer's assertions on the divine right of kings. Locke championed the idea of equality at birth, arguing against the notion that one man could hold dominion over others based on lineage. The American Declaration of Independence reflects this view. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. This concept was groundbreaking, especially considering that many at the time viewed biblical accounts as literal history. Locke challenged the traditional belief in primogeniture, the idea that the firstborn son inherits all, which was more a European construct than a biblical one. The phrase, Adam's private dominion and paternal jurisdiction, encapsulates a line of reasoning used in the 17th century to justify monarchical rule, particularly the idea that monarchs inherit their authority directly from Adam, the biblical first man. Here's how this reasoning suggests that monarchs, but not others, inherit this authority. Adam's private dominion. The concept of Adam's private dominion stems from the interpretation of biblical accounts in which God grants Adam dominion over the earth and all living creatures. In this view, Adam is seen as the first ruler or sovereign by divine appointment. The private aspect implies that this dominion was a unique and personal grant from God to Adam, establishing a model for individual rulership. Paternal jurisdiction. The notion of paternal jurisdiction builds on the idea of Adam as not only the first ruler but also the progenitor of all humanity. This concept suggests that Adam had natural authority over his offspring, akin to the authority a father holds over his children. Thus, Adam's role as the first father established a template for paternal governance, where rulers govern their subjects as a father would govern his family. Inheritance of authority. Combining these concepts, proponents of the divine right of kings argued that monarchs, as descendants of Adam, inherited his unique authority. This line of thinking posits that the right to rule, initially vested in Adam by God, was passed down through the generations to monarchs. Therefore, kings and queens were seen not merely as political figures, but as inheritors of a divinely sanctioned authority that originated with Adam. Exclusivity to monarchs. This reasoning was used to establish a special status for monarchs, setting them apart from ordinary people. It suggested that only those in the royal lineage, which was traced back to Adam, were divinely chosen to rule. This exclusivity reinforced the idea that monarchical authority was not merely a political or social construct, but a sacred inheritance. The phrase, Adam's private dominion and paternal jurisdiction, encapsulates a theological and political argument used to justify the exclusive right of monarchs to rule. It suggests that monarchs inherit their authority from Adam, who was the first ruler by divine grant. This framework was part of the broader doctrine of the divine right of kings, which Locke and other Enlightenment thinkers challenged, advocating instead for government based on the consent of the governed. Transitioning to the state of nature, Locke envisioned it as a realm of perfect liberty, where individuals were free to act as they wished, constrained only by the law of reason. This law prohibited harming another's life, liberty, or property. This perspective was revolutionary for the 17th century, shifting the basis of truth from religious doctrine to human reason. However, this state of perfect liberty had its drawbacks. In the absence of societal structures, the strong could easily dominate the weak. This predicament leads us to the concept of the state of war, where violations of liberty, such as theft or violence, result in a direct conflict between individuals. In Locke's view, the outcome of the state of war must be the defeat of either the antagonist or the victim. In the state of nature, there is no mediating authority, so the only means the victim has to defend themselves is whatever force and violence they can muster on their own. Because of this, the defender has a right to kill the attacker if necessary to protect their own life and property. Locke's views on slavery also emerge from this framework. Traditionally, slavery was justified by the notion of natural superiority and inferiority, assuming that some groups of people are superior to others and that they therefore have a right to enslave the inferior. Because of Locke's emphasis on equality at birth in his mind, there can be no superior or inferior people. In this case, he justifies slavery by assuming that since the slave has been defeated, he may as well be dead, and since he is dead, he has no rights. This is supported by the idea that if the slave refuses to do the master's will, he can be killed. What we will notice is that Locke's ideas of equality and slavery are contradictory. If Locke had followed the logical progression of his argument, he would have argued there is no justification for slavery. But slavery was so embedded in the cultural landscape of the time, he possibly could not imagine such a stretch. Locke also benefited financially from the slave trade, so it would take several decades for the Enlightenment to evolve to the idea of the abolition of slavery. Next, we delve into Locke's conception of property. He argues that property is created through labor and exists initially in a state of nature. This notion extends to the acquisition of wealth, where perishable goods like apples are exchanged for imperishable ones like gold or silver. Locke's views on property and liberty intertwine, suggesting that infringing on someone's property is the same as infringing on their liberty. Locke's philosophy then leads us to the formation of political societies. Individuals, recognizing the precarious nature of their liberty and property, agree to form governments for mutual protection. This agreement entails sacrificing some personal freedoms for collective security, exemplified by the payment of taxes. Here, Locke posits that government should primarily protect property, echoing the concerns of property owners. Finally, we come to a critical aspect of Locke's theory, the right to revolution. If a government fails to protect property and instead infringes upon it, it enters a state of war with its citizens. This principle underpinned the American Revolution, where the colonists rebelled against a government they believed was violating their rights. Locke describes the dissolution in government in Chapter 19 of his treatise. Locke makes it plain that the sole purpose of government is to protect and preserve liberty, which includes private property. He argues that whenever the government fails in this obligation and instead threatens the people's liberty is analogous to entering a state of war in the state of nature. We will recall that in a state of war, the only means of defense is self-defense. We will also recall that a state of war ends with the death of either the antagonist or the victim. In the case of the government and the people have a right to defend themselves from the encroachments of government to the point of terminating the government, at which point it can be replaced. Locke answered the possibility of governmental chaos because of minor discontent in paragraph 225.
I answer, such revolutions happen not upon every little mismanagement in public affairs. great mistakes in the ruling part, many wrong and inconvenient laws, and all the slips of human frailty will be borne by the people without mutiny or murmur. But if a long train of abuses, prevarications, and artifices, all tending the same way, make the design visible to the people, and they cannot but feel what they lie under, and see whither they are going, 'tis not to be wondered that they should then rouse themselves, and endeavor to put the rule into such hands which may secure to them the ends for which government was at first erected.
Now listen to the words of the Declaration of Independence.
The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. He has refused his assent to laws, the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. He has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance, unless suspended in their operation till his assent should be obtained, and when so suspended, he has utterly neglected to attend to them. He has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people, unless those people would relinquish the right of representation in the legislature, a right inestimable to them and formidable to tyrants only. He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly, for opposing with manly firmness his invasions on the rights of the people.
And it goes on. Is this not a long train of abuses? We will discuss the Declaration more fully in a later class. For now, we should just realize how closely Locke's ideas influenced the Founding Fathers. We should also take away a few other things. Locke asserted that all people are created equal, but they become unequal through acquiring property. Thus, when the United States began, only property owners could participate in government. Equality has been an elusive prize in U.S. history. Even though we have made great strides, we still live with inequality in many aspects of our lives. Although by the end of the Revolutionary era, the concept of individual inalienable rights had fired the imagination of the citizens for decades after, the primary focus of government would remain property rights. In contrast to the American Declaration, the French Declaration of the Rights of Man and the Citizen proposes all men are born and remain free and equal. Some scholars contend that the first revolution for liberty as we understand it began in France in 1789. Locke's ideas on property and governance form the bedrock of our political system and the rationale for our revolution. While our contemporary understanding of democracy and rights has evolved, Locke's influence remains undeniable. His theories provide a foundation from which we can explore the development of modern political thought. Please proceed to answer the questions in the discussion assignment. If you have any questions, please use the open forum discussion or contact the professor through Canvas.